Hello, fellow Affordaplane builders. This is Terry Adair, Houston, Texas. RealHandyman.com, the handyman for hire. You can find me on Facebook, and you can find my YouTube videos, obviously. Well, I have a little bit of progress here I wanted to share from the last video. Last video where we had pulled out the wings and we were finishing one off. And here is the wing that is finished. We are ready to start covering this wing as soon as we finish the second one. Now, what I was working on in the last video was building this spar that goes all the way down the center. And you can see this in the plans on near the back pages. There is a wing illustrated that utilizes this, and basically this is just a truss that helps not only support each individual rib from compression, but it also helps keep everything lined up from one end to the other so that we don't really have any swaying back and forth. Doesn't really add a whole lot of weight to the airplane, but as you know, everything adds weight, so keep this in mind. Also, I've added a brace from this, I guess I say bracing out to my wing bow, and that helps. That's going to help with compression as well when I start to do the covering. And I've added a 12-inch curve and a 12-inch curve on the bottom. Now this one here curves a little bit more because it tapers as it goes to the top, and that's the whole wing. Please excuse my mess, as I do build in my garage, and we share this for all kinds of things. So that is that wing that's completed, and the other wing frame is out here on the sawhorses. It's all leveled out, and I'm starting to build the wing ribs that I'm going to be placing on there. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, I do have a jig that I use to bend my top airfoil, and this is it right here. It's actually one of two pieces that I use, and I use this one first, and that helps me get the general curvature that I'm looking for. You can see this outline here. It looks like it's painted, and that is the outline specs from the rib that came off the plans. So I wanted to stay somewhat close to that, but I also am using the aluminum ribs, and it's difficult to get the complete bend with just this one jig. Now the website, or I'm sorry, the YouTube page of the YouTube wing rib that I shared in my last video, they have a much more exaggerated template that they use to bend their ribs for their application. I'm sure that would not be the exact rib that I needed. I probably could have requested maybe a template from those folks, but I went ahead, I wing it, and I made my own. So this is using the profile of the Affordaplane's cross section. I built that, and I use that. And you have to overbend because it's going to spring back some. Now, I come over here where I assemble my wing ribs, and I have another small jig here, and this is also listed in the plans for the aluminum rib option. And I just slip my rib in there to finish off the bend. And I have one here that I can demonstrate, and I'll show you. As I put that in there, I use that to get a little bit more curvature off of the front, and it's not in there perfectly straight, but just to show you the idea. And then down here I've marked on the table about how far I need to go, so that when I come back and I have my spring back, I can take the rib and place it up here in my jig. And that is outlined with a red marker, and the blocks help hold everything in place. And I keep everything inside my little red lines. Now this whole saw here, this illustrates my front wing tube. And here's a front wing tube. It's just a little bit bigger, but that's okay. It allows me a little bit. Also for the rear, I have another one back here, and it's a little more closely matched, as you can see. But that's what I'm using these hole saws for. They're just screwed down to my tabletop to replicate a wing tube. So if I get everything lined up on here nice and smooth the way I want it, then chances are by the time I pull this out and I take it and put it on the wing, everything's going to fit just fine. So last video I said that there was a jig that I was using to cut these wing ribs. Now I start with the lower ribs first, and you do have to, you know, take your measurements from the plans, but to figure out the, I'm sorry, let me move the camera, to figure out the lengths from here to the back, you're going to have to do a little bit of experimenting. And my suggestion is, once you get that perfect just the way you want, then go ahead and make all your wing ribs at one time before you make any adjustments to your saw. Now I'm going to walk over here to my chop saw, and I just use a normal miter saw. It's not a special blade, that's actually just a wood blade on there. It cuts PVC, it cuts aluminum like butter. Now this is what I start with, a straight 1/2 inch aluminum tube. The first cut I make, I slide the tube all the way down. I've got the saw miter adjusted to about 51 degrees, and I make a little cut. I hold that down, I cut it, and then I push it forward. As I push it forward into this jig, I have to rotate it. And it slips in there just like so. Keeps this from moving around so that when I make the other cut, they are the same. As in, they're not askew. I then come over here, hold that, and I make that cut. Now, this saw is set up right now for the top ribs. They're a little longer than the bottom ribs, obviously, because they have to curve. Now, there's no mention of exactly how long that should be. And like I said, you're going to have to experiment with one. Start cutting longer first. Slip it into your jig, if this is how you choose to make your ribs, and see what it takes to get in there. Now, if you're just a little bit over, just a little bit, that's okay, because the next thing I do is I bring them over here to the angle grinder, and I've got a sanding disc flapper wheel. You can see I've cut all of my bottom straight ribs here, and they're pretty rough looking. But we will come over here with these, and we will just use this wheel to kind of go around them and clean them up. And then after, I'm going to use a die grinder with a flapper wheel, and this flapper wheel will be used just to come over here and cope the end of that rib just a tiny bit. Don't overdo it, it doesn't take a lot, but that's going to help you get these things to fit nice to the tubes. So once I have all of this where I want it, I have a template that I have made out of cardstock. And this is not in the plans. I did this out of paper to see what I needed in order to join this rib and this rib together. And this is what I came up with. You bend it right there, and you put it top rib, bottom rib. You put your holes, drill an 1/8 inch. I put 2 rivets on top, 2 rivets on bottom. It holds that secure. Now, I don't do anything with this section right here yet, because that's going to go on the main tube of the airplane. But I go ahead and I pop rivet that in place with some stainless steel rivets. Oh, I guess I should mention, that's just the template to make this out of aluminum. And this is 32 thousandths, very thin aluminum. And I bend it on the vise. So this is the paper representation of that. That's what actually holds the wing. And I do the same thing for the back. Again, I have a paper template that I made, and I trace that out onto a piece of aluminum, just like that. I bend it on that line in the vise, and I place it up in here. 2 rivets on top, 2 rivets on bottom, and again, right here, that represents the tube. I don't do anything with that until I take it to the wing. So we'll take those off. So that tells you exactly how I'm building my ribs. Once those two are built, you can then take them over to your framework and place them at the measured locations per the plans. Now, it helps if you do something like this. Now, they don't have to be exactly perfect, but you know, you want to get as close as you can. I've built, just out of a scrap piece of aluminum, what I call a wing spacer. And I use this along the wing from my first measurement down to the end. And I generally start on the wing root, because that's the end that's going to connect to the airplane, and I work my way down. And I use the spacer in between. I'm sorry, guys, this video is a little shaky, but you can see how I use this to separate my wing ribs. So that's how we cut them. This is part of the plans we got to set up. This is how we do the wing rib. And if you want a real good video, go back to my last video, look at the bottom and search, or just click on YouTube wing rib, and you'll see how they do these. And they're putting these in their production kits. Now, over here to the airplane, I did say there were some things we were going to do with the fuel tank. What have we changed with the fuel tank? Well, we've changed how the fuel comes out, where it comes out. Now, you will remember from previous videos that this is where I had this joint. And I did the 90 to try to avoid hitting the seat. But as you can see, I still hit the seat and I had some wear. Now, what I really did not like the way my previous setup was is the fuel could not be completely extracted. And that's just due to the fact that, first of all, these bulkhead fittings, you know, they're a little bit high up there. So by the time you starve the engine of fuel, you still have 60 ounces of fuel left in the tank. Now, 60 ounces of fuel is 60 ounces of fuel. I mean, that's 15, 20 minutes worth of flying left. And I was not happy about that. So, and also I wasn't happy about it hitting the seat. So I went ahead and purchased another bulkhead fitting right here. And I drilled this into the tank at its lowest point that I could possibly get it. Now, remind you that the inside of this bulkhead fitting has a nut and a washer, and just like this does. So there is still a little bit of a gap of unusable fuel that you're not going to be able to get to without tipping the plane over its left side. But it's only 8 to 10 ounces of fuel now instead of 60 ounces of fuel. So that is a huge improvement. Everything else stays as it was, but we're just collecting the fuel from a lower point. Now, I would advise not to store fuel in your airplane. You don't want to just invite moisture in there, but you know, get the most of the fuel out of the tank you can when you're not using it. These are small airplanes, small fuel tanks. It should not be that hard. If I absolutely need to, I can just unscrew this with a crescent wrench and reach inside with, you know, what I used to empty the tank the first time was actually just a paintbrush on a long piece of PVC, and I think I still have it right here. Yes, right there. Just taped it on there, and I reached in through the top of the tank. Once all the fuel that wanted to drain out drained out, I used that to just kind of brush the rest of it up there. And if you leave the cap open, that little bit of fuel will evaporate. And these two-stroke engines, you know, alcohol is a little more susceptible to, you know, water accumulating than motor fuel is. But, you know, there's no reason, if you're not going to be using your airplane for a while, to store fuel in it. Small tanks, get the fuel out. So, okay, a lot of people have been asking about, hey, how much money you've invested, how much does the plane weigh, where do you buy your parts? Well, I can't tell you exactly how much the plane weighs just yet. It is an Affordaplane. We know what's online. We know what the plans say. I'll have to wait until this thing's completely done before I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Wanted to share with you where we've been getting some of our parts. Now, some people, they've been asking, hey, can I get the plans? Can you send me the plans? No, we're not going to send the plans. You need to go to Dave Edwards' Affordable Airplane site. They're only 20 bucks to get the plans. You may find that throughout the Facebook page, throughout photographs, you may see a page from the plans here and there, but there are over 200 pages in the plans. And you really need, even if you don't want to build an airplane, hey, what's 20 bucks to go ahead and peruse over and see if it's something you like to do? It's a lot cheaper than what some other aircraft plans cost, and you know, it's all a learning experience. It's all fun. So go to Dave Edwards, pay him 20 bucks, get the plans. Nobody's going to share the plans with you for free. Now, as far as all the parts that we're using, I've been using vendors such as Recreational Power. They provide the engine, they provide some instrumentation, fuel tubing, whatever you need. Aircraft Spruce I use for a lot of my hardware, some of my aluminum, you know, just odds and ends, whatever I need, safety wire, cables. Lockwood Aviation. Lockwood Aviation is where we purchased the stainless steel wing brackets. They're kind of like Aircraft Spruce. You find a lot of the same stuff, cross-references over. Leading Edge Airfoils. Good company. I have ordered quite a few things from Leading Edge Airfoils, including my engine information system, all my cables for my throttle, my combiners. All of that stuff came from Leading Edge Airfoils. And my fuel primer, also Leading Edge Airfoils. Summit Racing. Summit Racing is where I have got my fuel tank, my 5-point harness, all my AN fittings for my fuel tank. Now, this fuel tank, I want to say it's about $150, $160. It comes with these two bulkheads. I'm sorry, these two bulkheads already pre-installed. I purchased a cap to cap one off, and then I purchased another cap to cap that one once I went over here and installed my own bulkhead fitting. But this tank's pretty thick. It's about 3/16 of an inch thick. It comes with the locking gas cap on top. I made a grounding cable here to ground to the airframe. Good deal. Not a whole lot of investment. You know, folks always say, how much is it going to cost? Well, you're going to spend some money if you're going to build an airplane. Even if you're going to build just a small airplane. All of these AN bolts, nuts, washers, phenolic pulleys, turnbuckles, all that stuff comes from Aircraft Spruce. Now, those rod ends I picked up at Summit Racing. Use the same rod ends down here on the bottom for the aileron and elevator control. But AN hardware, definitely you want to be using AN hardware. Don't use Home Depot, Lowe's, AutoZone. Use AN hardware from Aircraft Spruce. This is an aircraft, albeit a small one. Use the best hardware that you can find. And AN hardware from Aircraft Spruce is very reasonable compared to local shops that I have found here in Houston. I've gone to Falcon Crest. I've gone to a little lady that owns her own shop down south of Hobby. And you can find them, but you're going to pay through the nose for them. You know, just go to Aircraft Spruce. They'll ship it all to you in a box. Pay a little shipping, but you'll save the money. So, expense-wise, the biggest expense on this airplane, by far, is the engine. And I got a rocking deal on this engine. As stated before in other videos, I ordered this from an individual who bought it brand new, never used it, and put it up for sale. I purchased it from his mechanic, who went over the engine, checked the cylinders and everything, even provided me a logbook with it showing that he inspected it, and it's a brand new engine, 0 time. Well, it now has 1.1 hours on it that I've put on it, and it has run remarkably. But this engine, the 2704 Hearth, dual cylinder, dual ignition, has a starter has a alternator or generator, whatever you prefer, and the gearbox. That setup will cost about $6,000 brand new. With the muffler and everything, I paid $2,500. I'm very happy I came across that deal. In fact, it is what inspired me to continue with my build, because that was my biggest purchase. My next biggest purchase was the aircraft's propeller. And I knew that I was going to be a little on the nose heavy side because I have a 53 horsepower engine. I wanted the lightest propeller that I could find, and it seems to be this power fin propeller. It's a 61-inch power fin propeller, and that did run approximately $1,000. So, guys, I'll tell you, I don't have more than $10,000 in this airplane. I don't have more than $9,000 into this airplane. I'm probably on the high end of $7,000, maybe $8,000 invested over a period of time. And all of this was purchased in increments, not in one lump sum. This engine, this propeller were the most expensive parts. That's $3,500 of my build. My engine information system and my Black Max wheels, brakes, tires was a $500 kit. The engine information system, I think, with all the sensors and wiring, was about another $500. So, guys, you can easily see that $4,500 of my cost has gone into pretty much firewall forward equipment. Engine, propeller, wheels, brakes. You don't need those wheels and brakes, but I wanted them. But you do need an engine, and you do need a propeller, so you're gonna have to pay for those. You know, fabric. I've got a roll of fabric hanging from the ceiling that I pull from. That's what I've, you know, put on the tail and will be going on the wings. You know, I ordered all of this. Now, some of my bigger purchases from Aircraft Spruce probably were up in the $800–900 range. But that was when I was getting a lot of my stuff together. Once I got going, most of the expenses are nickel and dime. You know, hey, I need this. That's $20. Hey, I need that. You know, that's $10. You pay as you go, folks. That's what you do when you build an airplane. Now, if you want something that you know exactly what everything is on it before you even start, you're going to have to go purchase an airplane that is an airplane prefabricated, offered by some other company like Aerolite 103 or Challenger. T-Bird's a nice little one. But all of these airplanes, you're going to come up with $15,000 up front. And you don't have the joy of building it. You know what you have. Hey, not taking anything away from it. You got $15,000, $20,000 you want to spend on an airplane, go ahead and do it. Or buy a used one off of Barnstormers. But this is a very rewarding project. And for those that are conscientious about the cost, working on a budget, that's why I chose this plane. So, you know what they say. You know, you can end up with a $15,000 airplane just, you know, buying all kinds of bells and whistles. But you can also end up with an $8,000 airplane. It just depends on what you want to put into it. So, you know, how much the thing costs, how much the thing weighs. Well, weight, I don't even know how much mine totally weighs just yet. I can't really share that with you because I've tried to put it on some scales, but, you know, I don't think those little scales I bought from Walmart are doing me justice. So, you know, you're going to have to make the decision if this is a project for you or if it's not a project for you. Nobody can do that for you. And your weight will not be the same as my weight, and my weight won't be the same as yours because we build differently. Everybody tries to build to the plans, but everybody ultimately also ends up changing a little bit here and there. Either due to the fact that they need certain materials or they can't find materials. Whatever it is. So guys, this video is getting a little bit lengthy. I hope I've shared a little more of this with you just to give you a better understanding of where we're at.